Back to the global exchange, we want to turn our attention back now to the magnitude 7.6 earthquake that has hit just off the coast of Costa Rica, the Pacific coast. As we noted here in the program, it's about 150 kilometers west of the capital of San Jose. Let's get more on this from the U.S. Geological Survey. And joining me on the line is Mike Blampede. He is with the USGS. Mike, what can you tell us now? Can you bring us up to date in terms of the magnitude, the depth, and there are early reports of damages? Do you have any sense of what's taking place on the ground?
Yeah, let me tell you what we know. I do not have reports of damage. CNN is generally the faster place to get that information. But USGS now estimates the magnitude at 7.6. The location is actually under land in northwest Costa Rica, as you said, about 150 kilometers west of San Jose. It's at a depth of about 40 kilometers, likely on the subduction interface, the interface between the Cocos tectonic plate on the west that is diving down under the Caribbean plate on which Costa Rica sits. The good news is that it's likely that the location and depth are such that the shaking, well, fairly significant. It may be that the depth has limited the damage. We're certainly hoping.
In fact, Mike, initially there was a tsunami watch on, and I know that's been lifted right now. When people who are just tuning into CNN are watching, say, 7.6, this must cause problems on the Pacific coast, and we must have a wave surge. But that necessarily doesn't have to take place.
That's right. This is an earthquake that appears to be located under land, and so the deflection of the Earth's surface, which, if under the sea, would cause potentially a tsunami, is likely not happening. NOAA, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, operates tsunami warning centers, including the Pacific and the Caribbean. Their initial estimate was that it was closer to the coast and larger, and so on that basis, on that very initial estimate, they did put out the precautionary watches and warnings for tsunami. But you know. Further examination puts it deeper and farther inland, so that there's less worry of that.
What does history tell us about the vulnerability of Costa Rica and, in fact, all of Central America there due to the fault lines? This is a sizable quake. What have we learned in the past with quakes around Costa Rica, and they've been centered on the Pacific coast or on the other side?
This is on the Pacific coast, and there is a large plate boundary that runs all the way down the western oceanic side of Central America and South America, in fact, and so the whole region is subject to occasional very large earthquakes. This one's in the pretty large category, and sometimes they get even larger, and these can cause quite a bit of damage due to shaking and also tsunamis. It's also possible for there to be smaller but much more shallow earthquakes that strike under land. And those have happened in the past and have caused very large losses in Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Guatemala, and so forth.
Okay, Mike, you mentioned Nicaragua there. I understand the tsunami watch is still in place in Nicaragua and Panama, and even on the Pacific coast of Costa Rica. What does that tell us, or is it too early to lift the tsunami watch? Just give us a sense of why or when they could be lifted.
Well, the strategy that NOAA uses for tsunamis is to make a very initial, very quick estimate of the likelihood for a tsunami. And they do this because it can be so few minutes between the time of the earthquake and arrival of a tsunami at the nearest coast, and so it's very essential that that be done quickly. Then, once done, NOAA looks for direct evidence of waves, either from coastal tide gauges or from their floating buoys at sea, which measure the wave height. And they wait for direct observations before canceling a watch or a warning, just to be on the safe side. And that can take a
Michael,
little
thanks
more
very
time
much for joining us.
For those waves to reach the buoys.
I understood. Yeah, thanks very much. Mike Blampede is with the U.S. Geological Survey, joining us on the phone, as you can see there, by the locator in Reston, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. Well, that's an external view of what's taking place on the ground in Costa Rica. Let's go to our internal analysis and bring in Mari Ramos at the CNN World Weather Center. What have you found out, Mari?
Well, very interesting, some of the things that that a specialist from the USGS was telling you. The fact that it is on land is very important. The fact that this quake actually is very intense but very deep is actually a good thing and less likely to generate tsunami waves. There's one more wave that an earthquake of this magnitude close to land like this could actually generate a tsunami. And that would be when you, Brandon, I don't know if you can hear me. Can we pull up the shake map here? That would be because the shaking can be very intense, sometimes underwater landslides can occur. And what he's mentioning there about having that initial assessment and doing it as a precaution. That's why from the very beginning you heard me say we do not know if a tsunami was generated. This warning is giving us a precaution for areas that may be affected. The fact that the epicenter occurred over land is actually a deterrent. But you see this bay right in here? This is an area that could have experienced some waves. And when we talk about a tsunami, this is something else that's very important. It doesn't have to be like what we saw in the Indian Ocean. It doesn't have to be like what we saw in Japan. Sometimes even very small waves, half a meter, several centimeters, are enough to cause flooding, especially in low-lying areas right along the beach, and in bays such as this one. Those areas like that could be more likely to experience flooding from even a small tsunami. In this case, we don't know if a tsunami was generated. If it had been, those waves would have already reached those areas particularly closest to the epicenter, and in those areas where Nicaragua is located, we'll be getting there pretty soon, and in Panama in about 20 minutes or so. Back to you.
The President of Costa Rica says there are no reports of casualties from a major earthquake there this morning. The 7.6 magnitude quake was centered on the northwestern Pacific coast, about 140 kilometers from the capital, San Jose. The earthquake caused a lot of shaking and some damage. One hotel owner near the epicenter says everything fell off the shelves and that the ground was rolling. Tsunami warnings were issued for much of Central and South America, but are now in effect only for Costa Rica, Panama and Nicaragua. Jenny Harrison joining us now with the very latest on this from the International Weather Centre. How's it looking?
Hey, Fionnuala, yeah, just as you said, of course, the good news that the tsunami warning has been lifted for many areas. Let's just show you, first of all, where we are talking about. Remember, you've got all these major plates. This is the Cocos Plate to the north. We've got the Caribbean Plate. The Cocos Plate actually is the subduction plate which goes underneath, and this is what has happened here. So there it is. There, of course, the epicenter, as you say, 7.6 magnitude, downgraded from the initial estimate of 7.9, 40 kilometers deep. The nearest place, Nicoya, just 11 kilometers, as you can see, from the epicenter, and in actual fact 141 kilometers to the west of San Jose. Now in total, San Jose has got a population of 335,000 people. You can see the shaking was actually strong across this entire region. Overall, about 500,000 people would have felt strong shaking. The structures in this area, they are overall quite vulnerable to earthquakes. But having said that, this particular region is very underpopulated. It's actually a very big tourist spot. There's lots of jungles people visit. There's resorts on the coast. And the pager informations coming out of the USGS are actually green, which means very low likelihood of casualties and certainly of any major damage. So, of course, we'll get more information in on this. But overall, despite the fact it was 7.6 magnitude, Fionnuala, it was 40 kilometers deep. And it seems so far that we haven't had any major reports of any damage or casualties.